what's up? Today, I'm gonna show you guys meticulously tested recipes for 3 very different styles of chocolate chip cookie: chewy, thin and crispy, and gooey. All 3 styles are delicious in their own way, but they're all aesthetically super different from each other. In this video, I'm gonna explain the virtue of all 3 styles, along with the techniques and ingredients that make them special. The last cookie in this video is stylistically something that I've never had, and now it might be my favorite chocolate chip cookie of all time. First up is the chewiest chocolate chip cookie. To get started, I'll drop 2 sticks or 230 grams of room temperature butter into my mixer bowl, then 100 grams of white sugar and 200 grams of brown. That's a 2-to-1 brown to white ratio, which adds some moisture to the cookie dough, and in my experience, that helps facilitate a softer chew in the cookie. Next, the paddle attachment goes on, and I'll cream this butter and sugar together for about 5 to 6 minutes on high speed. Creaming is a technique that I use when I want to whip air into a cookie dough. It creates a cookie with a lighter, softer texture and helps the cookie spread more evenly in the oven. After a couple minutes, I'll stop the mixer and scrape down the sugar butter to make sure everything is creaming evenly. Then I'll mix this on high speed for another 2 to 3 minutes until the sugar and butter are whipped up into a light colored paste that kind of looks like frosting. Next, I'll add in 5 grams of vanilla extract, 2 large eggs and 1 egg yolk, and then I'll spin those in on low speed. I'm going low because if you mix egg whites aggressively, they can trap air into the cookie dough, which would make it puff beautifully in the oven, but then collapse into an overly crispy cookie. And that's not what we're going for. Next, I'll add in 3 grams of baking soda, 3 grams of baking powder, 7 grams of salt, and 330 grams of bread flour. Bread flour is higher protein than all-purpose, and functionally, more protein means more gluten development, which for this cookie means more chewiness. Now, I'm just gonna mix this on low speed to fold the dry stuff into the wet, but I'm gonna mix it for longer than I would for a regular cookie. I actually want to develop a little bit of gluten here. So to make sure I mix this the exact right amount, I'm gonna set a 60-second timer and kind of knead this cookie dough. Normally, over mixing a cookie is the opposite of what we want to do, but to get a satisfying chew, we actually need to link up some of the gluten proteins. And after 60 seconds, we've got a cookie dough that has just a tiny bit of stickiness to it. That's the chewiness. Finally, I'll add in 225 grams of chopped 70% cacao baking chocolate. To prep this, I started with 2 bars of standard issue baking bars and chopped them down into a small dice. I prefer chopped chocolate for almost all of my cookie recipes because it melts in a really beautiful, varied, and dynamic way that chocolate chips just don't. That's not to say chocolate chips can't be great when used in the right context. And in fact, I'm going to be showing you a recipe using chips later in this video. Once this chocolate's broken down into half or 1/4-inch chunks, I'm going to grab a fine mesh strainer and sift out the chocolate particulate. This dusty stuff smears into the cookie dough and kind of blurs the line too much between cookie and chocolate. Once the chocolate's in, I'll mix on low speed for about 20 seconds, then give the dough 1 quick blast of high speed to spread everything out more evenly. Next, I'll grab a 4-ounce portion scoop. This is a tool that I own almost exclusively for scooping cookies, but it really does the job of popping out compact, evenly shaped, evenly sized balls of cookie dough perfectly. Link in description if you want one of these, or sub in a 1/2 cup measure. Next, I'm gonna drop a couple pieces of chopped chocolate that I reserved into the scoop, then I'll pull the scoop against the side of the bowl to pack it full of cookie dough. Then I'll drop this scoop onto a little sheet tray lined with parchment. Putting those chunks of chocolate in the bottom of the scoop ensures that each cookie has a nice melted chocolatey look on top. Okay, once I've got 8 cookie balls spread out on my sheet tray, I'm gonna wrap them up with plastic wrap, then drop into the freezer for at least 1 hour, but preferably overnight. Once frozen, these cookie balls will keep for about 5 to 6 weeks before the butter starts to pick up flavors from the rest of the freezer. Okay, once the cookies are frozen, I'm gonna pull them out and drop 4 onto a parchment lined sheet tray. Then I'll hit each ball with a liberal sprinkling of flaky salt. If you don't have flaky salt, you could sub in a coarse crack from a sea salt grinder if you have one of those. The salt provides a huge hit of contrast to the buttery sweetness, and it's essential for a chocolate chip cookie, in my opinion. Next, the cookie sheet goes into the oven, and I'll bake at 375 F for about 18 minutes. And after about 18 to 20 minutes, these things are brown around the edges and still a touch soft in the middle. Ooh, and those chocolate chunks that we put on top have melted into cheetah spots. When I break into one of these cookies, you can see that we've got a beautiful cross section of chunky chocolate and buttery, squishy cookie. Now let's taste it. There's just the thinnest veneer of cookie crunch on the outside, and then it is so satisfyingly chewy all the way through. When I say chewy, it's not like the cookie is tough. It's just that it gives your jaw a little bit more of something to work through, and it gives you this cathartic eating experience. You're kind of working through something. I don't know. It just feels good. I want to chew it. Next up is a thin and crispy cookie that has more in common with a Butterfinger than the cookie we just made. Go off, Thin King. I'll start by dropping 275 grams of butter into a saucepan and melt it. No creaming the butter and sugar for this one. Over at the mixer, I'll combine 125 grams of white sugar with 125 grams of brown sugar and 30 grams of corn syrup, but you could sub honey if you ain't got no syrup. Next, I'll get the mixer spinning to combine the sugars, then I'm gonna grab my melted butter and just stream that in. Make sure the butter isn't super hot because that'll melt the sugar and make it way harder to bring this whole thing together into a usable dough. Okay, once the butter's in, I'm gonna spin until everything is homogeneous, then I'll come back with my wet ingredients. That'll be 30 grams of milk, 10 grams of vanilla extract, and 1 large egg yolk. Now the wet will get a quick mix for about 30 seconds with the butter sugar to get everything combined, then it's on to the dry. That'll be 8 grams of baking soda, 10 grams of salt, and 285 grams of all-purpose flour. Now the paddle attachment goes back on and I'll slowly mix the dry into the melted butter sugar. That'll take about 45 seconds on low speed, and once it's looking combined like this, it's officially cookie dough. Well, that's generous. It's more like cookie batter. This has way more butter and sugar in it than a regular cookie, and that makes it very sloppy. But it's gonna give us a cookie that spreads out like crazy in the oven, and the butter and sugar are gonna fry the flour and give us a very unique flair and texture. Next in goes 165 grams of chopped chocolate. Again, that's 70% cacao baking bars that I chopped down into 1/4 to 1/2 inch chunks and sifted out the dust. Finally, I'll add in 100 grams of chopped walnuts that I broke down to about the size of a pea. Don't go bigger here because they'll start to steal the show texturally. Okay, the mixer paddle goes back on one last time and I'll fold everything together for about 20 to 25 seconds. And one more quick rip on high speed to get things spread out, and that's an unconventional cookie dough that looks a little bit greasy, but it's all in the plan and these are gonna be sick. Next, I'll scoop out roughly 45 grams at a time. At this size, the recipe should yield about 24 to 26 cookies. Now I'll lay these out 2 by 3 on a parchmented sheet tray, and I'll very briefly roll the dough in my hands to make it a little bit more even, but I don't want to develop any gluten. Finally, I'll put a little piece of chocolate on top, just like I did for the Chewy boys. Then I'm gonna move these cookies over to the fridge to firm up for 10 minutes. You could skip this step, but I find that it helps the cookies spread into prettier, more round circles. After a 10-minute chill, I'm gonna sprinkle each cookie with a little hit of flaky Malden salt or cracked sea salt. Then the tray goes into a 325F oven and I'll bake these things for 14 to 16 minutes. While that bakes, I want to thank Trade Coffee for sponsoring this video. I drink Trade Coffee literally every morning because honestly, they make it hard not to. They send freshly roasted coffee from the top roasters across the country directly to my door as often as I need it. As a predominantly decaf drinker, I really appreciate their wide selection. Trade's decaf options are orders of magnitude tastier than what you can get at the supermarket. But since I'm going to be hosting my caffeine addicted family members for Thanksgiving, I thought it'd be nice to have one of Trade's tasting sets. This one's from Alma Coffee and includes a bunch of different roast levels and different processing methods. I personally tried the natural process coffee, and have you guys had that before? It's so dope. It kind of smells and tastes like Fruity Pebbles in a good way. This Alma box is actually one of Trade's curated gift boxes and would make a really great gift for a teacher, male person, best bro, gal, pal, or you know, anyone who likes good coffee. Or you could always just gift them a classic Trade Coffee subscription. That'll give them personalized matches based on what they like. So to pick up some coffee for the holidays or to give the gift of really great coffee, head to drinktrade.com/Brian. Again, that's drinktrade.com/Brian, and the link is in the description. After a 15-minute bake time, I'm gonna pull this sheet tray out of the oven and inspect these things for crispness. Oh my bro, these things look nice. I mean, look at them. Ooh, is that my Reuben sandwich? My little rooster, my little Ruby sweet. Love you. Anyways, as you can see, these cookies baked out super nice. They're thin, they're golden brown, and they look like a better version of a Tate's cookie. It almost tastes like the middle of a Butterfinger, dude. It's like the flour and butter and sugar all kind of combined into something that is extremely crunchy and salty and sweet, but you have no way to understand exactly what it is. It's insanely delicious. And texturally, you can hear it. This thing is a dream. Overall, it's just a fun cookie. They're salty, they're sweet, they're crunchy, they're super, super buttery, and I really hope you try them. Okay, the last cookie is a totally new style for me, and I'm super stoked to share it. I'm talking about the gooeyest chocolate chip cookie. For that, 200 grams of brown sugar, 100 grams of white sugar, and 1 stick or 115 grams of butter go into my stand mixer. This is about half the butter that you'd see in a Chewy cookie, but less butter means more gluten development, which means a cookie that doesn't spread so much in the oven. A taller cookie has more interior space for goo. Now the mixer goes on with the paddle, and I'll mix on high speed for about 5 to 6 minutes. Since there's less butter in the base of this particular cookie dough, it's not gonna look as creamy as cookie 1. It's gonna look sandier and have a coarser texture, like this. From here, I'll add in 5 grams of vanilla extract and 1 large egg along with 2 egg yolks. Then I'll mix those in slowly over medium or even low speed. Once combined, I'll add in 7 grams of salt, 3 grams of baking soda, 3 grams of baking powder, and 15 grams of cornstarch. This gives the cookie a little bit more of a softer, spongy texture than a crispy one. Lastly, I'll add in 200 grams of all-purpose flour and 130 grams of cake flour. Cake flour has about a third less protein than all-purpose flour and close to half of that of bread flour. Protein content is kind of a proxy for how much potential gluten a given flour has, and for us, all this means is weaker, lower protein flour generally creates a really fluffy, tender result. It gives us the opposite of chewy, basically. Once all the dry is in the bowl, I'm gonna turn my mixer on to low speed and fold everything together for about 1 minute or until the flour is combined with the butter and sugar and it looks golden brown like this. The last addition will be 300 grams of chocolate chip morsels. I've opted for these over the chopped chocolate that I used in the first 2 cookies because morsels have stabilizers in them like soy lecithin, and that helps them hold their shape during the bake. This creates distinct little pockets of chocolate melt that are very pleasurable and make for a much gooier result. Now I'll just fold those morsels into the cookie dough for a few seconds, then I'll grab my 4-ounce cookie scoop or a half cup measure and scoop out 8 big dog cookies. Once scooped out, I will wrap them up with plastic, then throw them into the freezer for a minimum of 1 hour. Though I think overnight freezing gives you the most 10 of 10 results. Okay, I'll rip up the oven quite a bit to 425F, then I'll grab my frozen cookie balls and lay out 4 per sheet tray, then sprinkle with some salt, then throw into the oven. At this point, you can really see how using less butter impacts the spread of these cookies. They go up, but they don't go out. This is great for goo. After 20 minutes, when I pull these out, you can see they've got a nice golden brown hue and they've got a little bit of crust on the outside. Now let's taste them. Texturally, this cookie is a freak, dude. It's got a shell of crunch on the outside, and then it's almost like cookie dough in the middle. The combination of the almost underbaked middle with the chocolate morsels gives you something that's very, very moist and soft. This reminds me of a mall cookie from the 90s, honestly. It's just maximalist. I love it. I really want to stress how cool this gooey cookie is. It's truly great, and I honestly think it's my favorite of all 3. If you like this video, please hit subscribe and consider watching another video. I'll link to one on the screen right here. That'll tell the YouTube algorithm that Brian Lagerstrom is a good boy who makes good videos. I'll see you in the next one, partner.